Welcome back to Burn the Ship, the podcast we connect entrepreneurs to help you go all in on your business. I'm your host, Ezra Brown, and without further ado, I'm going to allow my guest to introduce herself.
Hi, I'm Angie Dobransky, founder and business coach at RAD Strategic Partners.
All right, Angie, tell us a little bit now of how you got into the business coaching side and how you got into this. This is what that professional journey's been like for you.
So this is my second career. I guess we'll call it my second career. My first career was I spent 20 years in the fashion industry. I went to business school. I got a degree in marketing. I became a buyer and later worked on the wholesale side as an account executive for large corporations. Had, like many people, this moment of, we'll call it corporate crisis awakening.
Right.
And said, there's got to be a better way. Was trying to figure out what to do with the rest of my life. And somebody introduced me to the idea of business coaching. They were like, you should be a business coach. And this was 17 years ago. Never heard of business coaching before at that point.
Right.
And, but I read their information they had and I was like, wow, this just sounds perfect, right? This is like, yeah, I can do this. And it was very exciting. And it took me about a year to really pull the trigger, and decide to quit my job and start a business. I was a single parent. My son was, I don't know, 13, 14 at the time. So it was a big step,
Yeah.
But I did. I quit my job and I started my coaching business in the summer of 2007. And then the Great Recession hit shortly thereafter. And so by the fall of 2009, I was basically one mortgage payment away from being bankrupt, and decided to, kick my butt in gear and decided I had to just make it work and did what I had to do and turn my business around in like 30 days and have been, riding the beautiful stretch of entrepreneurship ever since.
That's awesome. That's awesome. So with that, obviously you went out on a whim in a very, I guess you would say a vulnerable time. It sounds.
But you didn't know it, right? Like,
right.
The thing is, right before the Great Recession, everybody was making a lot of money. So it seemed like, oh, well, this is like a good time to start a business, right? Like everybody's making money. You didn't really see what was coming.
Right.
Until the banks collapsed and it came.
Absolutely, yeah. Because my family was in the building and construction world when that happened, so it
right.
definitely.
And I'm sure they had the same thing. They didn't see it coming until it hit. I mean, you had like a week that you saw it coming, but it was like a week,
Right. Yeah, absolutely. And there's a lot of money tied up everywhere else and things like that. But with business coaching, especially when you got into it, it was definitely a nuanced business, essentially.
It was interesting, yeah.
What got you into that?
Here's the thing. Like, I understand business. I'd spent my whole career in business, and I'm and I was a true professional, right? I graduated business school. I went in the corporate world, and I wanted a professional career. I wanted to own my own business, but I wanted to be the professional that I was, right? So
that makes sense.
Right. And this really brought that out. It combined my real skills and talents with a business. And I will say, when I first opened the business, I didn't really expect to be a business coach. I thought I would become a business coach and then build a business coaching firm and hire some coaches to work for me. That was the plan. And and once I started coaching and seeing the effect and the power of what I was helping other people bring out in themselves, there was just no way I would not do that, right? It's funny now because, people ask me, like, when are you going to retire? My brother to send me a text, when do you think you're going to retire? And I was like, well, if all goes well, the day I die, right?
Right.
How would you stop doing something that is it's such an amazing service for people, and it is also so personally rewarding. Just seeing people grow into their full selves is amazing.
Absolutely. And I'm sure you've heard this term. That's what I've always heard my whole life is if you do what you love, you'll never work a day.
Exactly. What's Zig Ziglar? Make your vocation, do what you love, and your vocation is your vacation.
Absolutely. That's awesome. That is awesome. So with the business coaching stuff is, what would you say has kind of been one of the strong suits for you? Because, you've been in business for a long time. So what's been something that you've been able to lean on over this?
There was a transition probably about 5 years into my coaching business so when I came out of big business, I had a business degree, I understood business strategy, and your family's in construction and you've probably interviewed many entrepreneurs. So you recognize that the average small business owner has no idea how to actually run a business, right?
Yep.
They know how to
and I'm in the merchant processing space, so I see it all the time.
Right. They know how how to do what they do, and many of them do it very well, but that doesn't mean they know how to run a business. Those are different things. And so in the beginning, I thought that what I need to do is teach them how to run a business, right? So I'll coach you through all the things you need to do to build a strong, healthy business. And I discovered that they would get to a place, depending on where they were and where they're trying to go, where they did know what they needed to do. They just
Mm-hmm.
couldn't do it.
Right.
And that was this moment I recognized that my real value is in actually helping them become the person who's
Mm-hmm.
able to run the business that they dream about building.
That makes
So,
sense.
so yes, I, teach them things along the way, and I have tools about growing a business, and I can, make good recommendations and all that, and that's a huge value. But the
Right.
real value of my coaching is all along, I'm helping you become the person you need to become,
Right.
to run that business. And I've had clients say like they've reached certain pinnacles, and they're like, "Oh, you told me it would be like this when I got here." And I'm like, right, because I've seen other people do it and I knew where you were in the path. And it's very reassuring to someone in a moment when they just aren't sure if they can make it, for a
Right.
coach to say, no, I've seen this before. You're right on the edge, right? Keep going
Mm-hmm.
and you will break through.
Yeah, you're right at the ceiling. Just keep punching, and you'll get through there.
Right.
That provides a lot of value. I'm sure that makes people, I guess people. What would you say in your industry? Do you see like skepticism? I've interviewed a couple business coaches in my time of doing this, but what would you say? Like, do you see skepticism in people before they see results, or like what is that? What does that kind of look like for you?
The challenge now in my industry, and this is a more recent phenomenon, is there's an awful lot of people calling themselves coaches that aren't coaches. And they aren't doing coaching work. And I'm not saying they're not doing good work, but they might have a program they're selling and consulting. That which is fine and has value, but that's not coaching, right?
Right.
And so what I find it creates confusion in the
Yep.
marketplace, because I think many people do understand what coaching is. They're looking for a coach, and they end
Mm-hmm.
up hiring somebody calling themselves a coach who's providing a different service. And then they're
Yep.
disappointed, and now they're unsure, right?
Right. That's why I asked, because this is one of those things where you see it, and it's you guys in your industry, like if they're you're ones of your own, so like you kind of, I guess you build your name completely off of your brand, completely off your name and your reputability, so those things matter, which is almost every business, in that sense. And I'm not sure, are you in a small town, or are you in a more of a metropolitan area?
No, I live in the DC metro area.
Okay, so you got a bunch of fish in there,
Yeah.
in that bowl there. So what would you say has kind of helped you grow your business over the time?
Consistent marketing. So I have a real actual formal marketing plan that I follow, 75% of, right?
Okay.
And I challenge myself to try new things in marketing, things that are uncomfortable. I've been trying a new strategy this year, which I don't really want to share because I don't want all the other coaches to know about it. But it was a complete experiment and a test, investing some money, and it's paid off like wow. And I'm like, ooh, okay, we'll do more of this. So consistent marketing, driving consistent value. You have to get results from your clients. I mean, yeah, it's hard to exactly measure ROI in coaching, but look, if you tell
Mm-hmm.
me what result you wanted to achieve, we can decide whether you achieved it or not, right? Like that's easy
Right.
to measure. So you provide results, and really my marketing and my business, I provide just real value all the time to everybody.
Okay.
All my emails, my videos, all that stuff is just real value. So I'm just
Right.
showing you who I am all the time. And,
Mm-hmm.
and that attracts the right people, and it honestly makes it, I mean, closing sales is easy. It's attracting that's the harder part, right?
Absolutely. And what would you say? Yeah, you gave me a good question right here. Is how do you know if somebody's an ideal client for you or not?
So, you kind of learn this over time, right? So, an ideal client
Absolutely.
for me is what I'm going to call a semi-successful business owner, right? So, they've
Okay.
built a business and they're making some money. So, they have an
Mm-hmm.
actual business and they're making some money. But they're either stuck where they are, or they're not making enough money, or they're feeling a lot of pressure. They're stuck. They can't figure out how to get from where they are to the next place, whatever that is for them.
Mm-hmm.
That's my ideal client, right? And I can tell you some attributes about them, right? Like they have a vision for what they're trying to build, meaning they're either trying to build a business that's some sort of legacy, or they have a succession plan, or they have a vision for what their business is in its ultimate form, right? It's not,
Right.
I'm in business to pay my bills. Those
Yep.
people are not the best clients for me, right?
Makes
Because
that makes sense.
right. A startup, I mean, I can provide a lot of value to a startup, not the best client for me, right?
Right.
Because I think they can get what I can provide for them cheaper, and my real value, they're not ready for yet, right? Like,
Right.
they're not ready to become the business owner. They just got to check off all the bazillion boxes and like getting it started. You know what I mean? So,
Exactly.
over time, you start to recognize like who are the clients that I can see huge value on their part from. And that's that semi successful business owner. Like, I'll tell you one of my, most, greatest success stories when they hired me, they said, this was exact, I'm hiring you because I want to take my business to the next level. And I'm
Hmm.
not sure what that is, but I know I could get it there.
That
Right.
makes sense. Yeah.
Right. So, I mean, that was pretty vague, but it was a vision, right? And so we
Right.
figured out what that was, right? And we grew that business, multiple times and, moved it out of a house and into an office and hired employees and, did all the things that got it, not only to the next level, but to like 5 levels beyond that.
Yeah. Which probably is mind blowing to that business owner too.
I remember we did a retreat one time at a very expensive place, right? They wanted to do a retreat. They paid for it. We're there, we're doing the retreat. And they said to me, just a couple of years ago, I couldn't even imagine being able to afford spending one night in a place like this.
So crazy.
And here we are.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, you
It
can't
is
always
insane
see
how
it.
how it shifts like that for people. And what would you say out of, once you find those ideal people that you're working with, and kind of what that basis is, if, correct me if I'm wrong here too, is you want to work with somebody that's been established and kind of looking to figure out what they can do to get a hands off of their business and to become where it's almost self-sufficient, and or they're looking for that exit plan.
For the most part, right? Because that's the ultimate end, right? So,
Uh-huh.
so even my clients who are like, say they're building, I'm, changing the world with my product or whatever, at some point I'm like, so what's your end game? And it is, when they get to be, say, over 50, what's your
Hmm.
end game? And
Yep.
it's interesting to me how the end game changes. Like many clients, their end game when does it even make sense to sell this business that you don't need to sell, that you still enjoy, that pays you several $100,000 a year?
Hmm.
And in the end, many of them don't sell.
Right. Yeah, because this becomes something that where it's like, I didn't know that I could operate this business without having to do this.
Right. Right. Which then creates this secondary conversation I have to have, which says, okay, well, what happens then when you die? Right. Right. Because now
Right.
you have a team and a business and an entity here, right? Like if you're not going to sell it, that's great, because I mean, I'm not going to sell my business either. But what happens
Right.
to your business when you die? So you've got to make that plan too, right? Who
Right.
is it that's going to step in and say, keep the lights on while they sell the business to somebody, right? And
Hmm.
it continues on. And, because by then you've got team members to worry about.
Right. You worried about, you got, you could have 50 people working for you, could have five, or could have 500, whatever that is for you
Right.
and your business. That makes a lot of sense. And what would you say is, what's your favorite part of your day to day, inside this coaching business?
I have to say, I mean, I swear I get as much from my clients, if not more than they get from me. Like, even if I'm having a terrible day, like those terrible days where you're deep down in that dark cloud and, everything's just hard moving. If I got a
Right.
client engagement, I can snap out of it, right? Spend an hour with the client in just this completely like amazing place and then come out myself transformed, right?
Right.
Into
Right.
into the more positive space. So that's my favorite part of the day to day, honestly, is the conversations I have with the clients.
That makes a lot of sense. And then, and with that is, you can feel infectiousness off of people, whenever it is like that. So it is, and I'm sure you've learned a ton because you get to, what actually, let me reframe this before I ask this question is, do you have specific industries you work with? You got like a vertical or a niche that are you specific to?
No, I can say honestly, I've worked like in every industry from attorney to zookeeper. It was exciting getting the zookeeper because that really made that turn into a marketing line.
Yeah, I was about to say that's pretty cool. That's actually pretty cool. So
No,
what would you
it's
go
not
ahead?
about industry. It's about these businesses that are kind of they're growing and
Yep.
they're at plateaus and they need help figuring out how to make the next jump. So it's not industry specific at all.
Absolutely. What struggles do you see with, going through multiple industries? Do you see any struggles in that?
No, no. I mean, every once in a while, you'll come across someone that's like, "Well, I talked to this industry specific coach, and why should I work with you instead of them?" And I'll say, if you prefer to work with an industry specific coach, then work with an industry specific coach. I can tell
Right.
you what I offer. You know, you can decide what's best for you. The
Yep.
huge advantage of not having a vertical like that is that I learn a ton from my clients that is applicable to all my other clients that
Hmm.
I can share with, and they learn from each other. And they'll all tell you that.
Yep.
You know, because I can try something. Like, I have clients that are in different businesses but very similar, right? Like, if you manage someone else's business as your business, so if you're
Hmm.
a property management company, an association management company, a financial management company, you actually have the same challenges.
Right.
So it's real easy to share learnings across those, with them. And that's a huge added value.
Absolutely, and that's why I paused myself because I was literally about to ask you what you just answered the full question for me, so I didn't even have to ask it. Was kind of what is that challenges, but it also probably does help you go in and be able to be loose and be like, well, I've seen this work for this industry, so maybe implement it here. If for something that's not been done, it could be something that's never been done there, and it could be like a pioneer of the space.
Right. And if you think about it, if you're in a real, a real strong vertical as a coach, how is it that you're not accidentally sharing industry secrets with other clients just in the course of normal conversation?
Yeah, no, I haven't even thought about that. That's a good question. That is actually a very good question. And then what would you say is off of that? What would you say is something that you struggled with when you first started your side of the business, your own business? Is what was something that you didn't do so well?
I would tell you in the very beginning, what I did not do so well was keep up with my bookkeeping. And like, I
Okay.
fell way, way, way behind. And I remember sitting down and having to do, like, I don't know, 9 or 10 months of record keeping, in order to do my taxes, and
Yeah.
swearing absolutely on that day that I would never put myself in that position again, which I never have. So that was a huge learning lesson. So that was big. The bookkeeping, like, is super important. That was
Mm-hmm.
big. And the other thing I learned pretty early on, and in a slightly expensive way, is that if you have employees, just use a payroll company.
Yeah.
It's too
She said
complicated.
slightly expensive way. I found that.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, no, those are some of the more common things we hear. Because we've had a lot of service people on here, just every industry from A to Z, on the podcast. And a lot of them will say, the industries, which as being a business coach, which industries I could, without even me saying them out loud, which industries are not good bookkeepers and doing
Right.
things like that on the back end. They're really good at screwing something into the wall or doing something like that, but they are not doing the back end of the business.
I
And
wonder how many of them, after COVID and the PPP and the idle situation, learned their lesson.
yeah,
Because the truth was, every small business owner in America who had good bookkeeping, who was paying themselves legitimately and filing taxes, really benefited from COVID.
absolutely.
Absolutely. The free money was just given to us, right?
Big time.
Or
Big
real
time.
cheap money through an idle loan, and lots of it, right?
Yep. Yep.
But the businesses who were messing around with taxes so they didn't pay a lot, didn't keep good records, they didn't
Hmm.
have that money available to them. And I wonder how many of them learned then the
You
value
know,
of the bookkeeping.
that's crazy. And then you see now it's a CRM driven world now.
Right.
Everybody's using the CRM, and back then nobody used the CRMs a ton. I would say CRMs are like new as of like 2018 to 2019, like type of deals where it really started popping off to where you go to that service tech company and they're actually all using a CRM, like your little mom and pop plumbing companies using something to do that, as opposed to just taking payments and going on about their day and using the old what's it called, the old notepad, legal
Right. Well,
pad.
I mean, that is one of the, you can argue plus and minus about technology and business, whether it's made it easier or harder. And there's
Yep.
arguments on both sides. But the bookkeeping, the estimating, the communication with clients, huge. I mean, technology has made that so much easier and so much more accurate and so much
Hmm.
better than you could have ever done by hand.
Yep.
That's
You don't have
that's
to remember. Hey, I got to hit up Lisa over here at this time, and then I got to do this at this time. Like
you don't
now,
have
you
this
got
like
something that.
50-page notebook of reminders that you've written
Yeah.
down of who you got to follow up when, you just put it in and you get better about it. So.
Yep. Looking for that one client's number that you talked to 6 months ago, and you're like, oh my god, I've talked to 1,050 people since then. I don't
Right.
know. I don't even know where it's at. That's funny. But no, what would you say? has been the biggest changes in business for you over this time span for you? Because I mean, you obviously run into successful business. You've been open. You know, any business that makes it longer than 3 years is successful, in my eyes. But you know, being in business over 10 years, that's significant. That's awesome. But what's been something, you know, that's really helped you?
Uh, Zoom and virtual technology getting better has really taken my business to the places I always wanted it to be, right?
Right.
Because coaching by phone never really works, mostly because either the coach or the coachee is not paying attention because they're on the phone, right?
Yeah.
And
You can't feel the base of the conversation.
right. And driving around from client to client, which I was doing, with at least some of my clients, is very inefficient, particularly in a
Yep.
crowded metro area like DC.
Hmm.
Um, but and there were tools like Skype and stuff, but they pretty much sucked. And I had a guy from Singapore that introduced me to Zoom more than 10 years ago, so long before anybody else ever heard. He said, "This is a game changer for you in coaching."
Hmm.
And he introduced me to it, and it was. And it was. And I really, once I understood Zoom, I knew that what I would need was virtual. Then I have freedom of location.
Right.
Um, and I can work with clients anywhere, so that's fantastic. And I really wanted to be virtual, and I was having a hard time getting there, but I was about 70% virtual. But it's very difficult to get people who've been seeing you in person to agree not to.
That makes sense.
Until COVID hit, and overnight we were all virtual. And the funny thing is, and my clients will agree, the coaching is better in the virtual environment than it is with me in their office.
I can see that because I come from being an athlete. So I'm a former athlete, and I'll explain why I feel that way, and then you let me know if it's some of the things they've said. Is you feel more open to tell them while they're via Zoom what that problem is, as opposed to whenever you're in person, they're like, I don't want to tell her that I didn't do these 3 things that she needed but via Zoom, they don't hesitate to be like, all right, I didn't do these 3 things. And then everybody's more honest and open about what's going on. So you get down to the wire of the problem versus like having to be like, is my program the problem? Is it,
Right.
no, it's you. It's you being a human is the problem.
Yes, that for sure. And to add on to that, I found that people, particularly the men, were a lot more vulnerable over Zoom because they weren't in their office. So they didn't have to worry that someone was going to overhear them being really open and vulnerable with the coach, right?
Yeah.
And it was through that vulnerability that we got huge, growth and
Yeah.
transformation, right? And you can imagine too, because everybody had a lot of fear around COVID. So everybody, they're all talking about it, and it's
Absolutely.
huge breakthroughs for people. So it was tremendous. And now when you add AI into Zoom meetings and many other things, but I have it set up now. I do a coaching call via Zoom, and both my client and I automatically get the AI generated summary of the meeting within minutes to our inbox.
Really?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes, with the highlights.
We're
And
gonna have
it's
to set
not
up a meeting and talk about that actually.
it's not perfect, but it's great, right?
Hmm.
So you know what I mean. So now you don't have to worry about note taking as much, and there's just it's transformed a lot.
Absolutely. So that is definitely something where if you got out in front of it, then yeah, for sure. Because Zoom's not something I chose to stay away from it as much as I could through college, just because I was like, I'm in person. I don't want to have any online classes, nothing like that. To
I'm
worry
telling you,
about.
I'm so jealous. I was talking with another client of mine who is a similar lifelong learner, very curious person, very intellectually capable, very similar to I. And we were both talking about, because his kids are in college, how if we'd have had access to Zoom and being able to first of all, if I'd have been able to watch a recorded lecture, I would have never, ever, ever showed up in class except to take a test.
See, I like
Right.
going to class. I'm a social butterfly. I like people. I like being
I
around
like
people.
people too, but that's not how I learn. I
Right.
and I'll tell you why. And I see if this resonates with you. I learn at a faster pace than the average person.
Yeah.
And there are
Absolutely.
also people who learn at a slower pace than the average person. So video and online allows me to speed it up,
Mm-hmm.
and it allows people to slow it down. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's about the pace. I just get bored in a live classroom because I've
Oh yeah.
already memorized the shit you guys are still talking about. Right?
Yep. Yep. Yeah. Yeah. I read the slide before you started talking about it. You can go to the
Right.
next one.
Right.
That's how I was. I was very similar like that. I enjoyed the interaction of class. Like I was always stand up and talk in front of the class, and I was, that was my thing. Because I enjoyed the interaction. That was what helped me know that I almost affirm what I already thought was the correct things on the
Right.
board. or whatever was going on. But me saying it out loud and getting you're a DA, or no, that's perfect. Yeah, it's perfect illustration there. That would really helped me. So then when we went online, like right there, I was in junior college before I went to my 4-year school. And when I was there, we had a lot of online stuff just because it was a small school. Teachers aren't driving to the middle of nowhere it's real hard to pay enough teachers to be there.
Right.
So we would do online classes, and my grades were terrible because it was online. I can hyper focus, but it's either it's polar.
Skills learning. Do you so my junior college and local one still offers online classes, and I still take them all the
Yeah.
time. I've learned how to do Photoshop and Illustrator and
Yep.
I'm interested in something. They got an online course, I'm in, right?
Yep.
So what about skill building? Do you do skill building learning online well?
So with all that stuff, I don't do any. I try to stay away from online as much as
Interesting.
possible. I'm very
You're ultra
different.
hands-on. You're kinesthetic. You want to touch it.
Big time, yes. So
Yeah.
if it was up to me, if I wasn't good at talking to people, I wouldn't be in sales. I would be outside building stuff. I'd be a lineman.
Yeah,
Or
you want to
probably
touch things.
be framing houses, doing stuff like that. That's the type of stuff that I enjoy doing it. So like if when I'm outside moving stuff, framing, I'm a tinkerer. I go tinker with my car, my whatever, one of our off-road vehicles. Go do stuff with them all the time. But that's the type of stuff that it passes time for me. Like I could do that and I'd never work.
It has to do with learning styles, which you like to figure it out. You like to touch it and figure it out and learn how to do it,
Yep.
right? I believe so. Since I was a little kid, I have said that I could do anything in the world if you gave me the manual, right? And then
Hmm.
YouTube came out, and I was like, I really can do anything in the world because the videos are here. And
Yep.
so, but that's the way I learn. I like you to show me and give me some
Hmm.
written directions because I can read faster than you can talk, right?
Right.
How to do it, and then let me then take that and learn it. Like that's how I learn. I don't want to
Yeah.
figure it out, right? I want you to just tell me how.
See, I want to figure it out. I want to
Right.
go. I want to. Don't tell me anything, because then I'm gonna be worried about. Oh, did I do this right? Did I do that? Let me figure it out, and then come back and be like, you screwed this up. This is where you need to fix it, and then I can go back and do that. But if you tell me the whole instruction manual right up front, I might actually just break down and just sit down and stare at the wall. Like
You're right.
not happening. My ADHD will not allow me to work in that fashion. For some reason, it's always been that way, though.
It's learning. We all learn differently. So some people like to read information. Some people like to be shown information. Some people like you like to tinker and touch. Some
Hmm.
people like to hear it. My learning style is considered a digital learner. I like
Yep.
to read. I watch YouTube instruction videos at 2 times the normal speed.
Yep. That's if I watch a video, it's always 2 times.
And my husband came in one time and he goes, "Why are they talking like that?" And I was like, "Oh, I can't listen at normal speed. I
Yep.
have to speed it up."
Yep.
But
It's like.
I like to read the information basically. I like to read the instruction and then follow it. So, and it's part of coaching, right? Is understanding how do you learn, right?
Right.
Like if I was working with you and I was telling you to go take a course,
I wouldn't do. I
that would be
wouldn't. It'd be
stupid
the.
advice, right? But I could say, "Well, why don't you go out and try this?"
Hmm.
And you'd be like, "Okay," right?
Yeah. Absolutely. All over. Yeah. You're completely right on that.
Yeah.
100%. And then Angie, one of the last things I got for you is, what does Angie want to do with her time? Whenever this is all set up, like you said, I just heard you say you want to work, and hopefully you retire the day you die. But what if you got time to go do something with your life? I don't know what it is what you like to do. Is it traveling, hanging out with the kids, the family? You want to go ride a Harley up and down Route 66? What is it that you want to do?
At heart, I'm an internally curious person. Curiosity is my biggest trait. So I like to travel. I like to explore. I like to try new things. My
Yep.
ultimate dream right now, we are very aggressively working to design and build a house in Todos Santos, Mexico, which is a small town on the west coast of the Baja Peninsula,
Hmm.
and move there and then coach virtually and have people come to our property and do coaching retreats.
That's awesome. So that property, is it on that same side as like Catalina?
No, it's on the Pacific coast. It's if you fly to Cabo, it's about a 45-minute drive north from Cabo along the Pacific coast.
Okay, yeah, yeah. So it's over there on that same side as California.
Yes.
Oh, yeah,
Yes.
yeah, yeah.
It's
Okay,
part of,
yeah.
as the Mexicans will tell you, it is the original part of all of the Californias. You get a whole different version of Mexican of history and geography when you talk to the Mexicans, by the way. Funny,
You well,
funny
they
aside.
yes, that's a conversation for a different time. Me and you can have that one a
Let me
different
give
day
you
because
I'm going to give you a short, quick story on that. One of my ancestors is the original settler of Webster City, Iowa. He was a wagon trainer, move west, stack your claim. Thought it was the
hmm
coolest thing ever. My whole life, I believed that we had moved west into unclaimed territory. Okay. Until I started spending time in Mexico and actually learned, no, we moved west into Mexico, right? And took that land from them. And I was
hmm
like, oh, who knew? Right.
everything west of Mississippi got taken from them,
Yeah.
or
I was,
Louisiana. I guess Louisiana we purchased it from them, but yes, same thing.
Yeah, it was like, who knew?
Yep. It's insane. It is insane. But no, and then the very last thing I have is, we called the podcast "Burn the Ship." Do you know where we got "Burn the Ship" from?
No, where did you get Burn the Ship from?
So we got it from Central American conquistador Hernan Cortez, lands in modern day Mexico, as we're talking about now. Thought he landed on Plymouth Rock, but he wasn't that lucky. Made his men disassemble their ships on the beaches and pull off all their belongings. And we looked at them and burnt all their ships on the beach and said, "We're gonna make it here. We're gonna die trying." We use the same such in entrepreneurship and in business. You have a perfect scenario of burn the ship. You said, "Look, I was one payment away from going bankrupt," and then you said you went all in for 30 days hard, and it's
Yep.
catapults you into 15 years of having a good career,
Right.
and being highly effective in your business. So what was that emotion like for you when you burned the ship?
Right before I burned the ship, I went out to get a part-time job, part-time commission job to pay the bills and keep the business going. And I
hmm
went and interviewed for this job, and they told me they didn't have any openings. And I literally in the interview said, "I don't think you understand who you're talking to," and
hmm
convinced them to hire me. Right.
Yeah,
So,
that's how it goes.
right. And they gave me the paperwork because I was like, I'm not the average person that comes in and applies for this job. Right. So,
And when you tell people that in a job interview, they freak out and they're like, "I need to hire this person now."
right. I was like, I don't know. I literally said, I don't think you know who you're talking to. I'm not the average person that comes in and applies for this job. Right. So,
Right.
anyway, they gave me the paperwork. I took it home. I was supposed to start on Saturday. And I couldn't fill in the paperwork. I couldn't do it. I couldn't do it. And I thought to myself, you have to make it work. I couldn't do it. Because you know what? To take a job, even a part-time job, right, was to admit that I had failed.
hmm
And I tell the story of starting my business in the first book I wrote. And to that, I had never failed at anything in my life, probably because I hadn't challenged myself as much as I could have.
Enough. Yeah.
But I never entertained the idea of failing when I started business. That never even crossed my mind when I started my
Right.
business. And when I was faced with, you're either going to do what you have to do or you're going to fail.
Uh-huh.
It was just like this emotion of like, I'm not going to fail. Right. And I'm not going to get a job and I'm going to make this work. And it was this
hmm
full shift of commitment, I think.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Because I've heard it all. I've heard it from. I used to cry myself to sleep all night, or to where I was like, where I didn't worry at all, and I'm like, I don't know how you don't worry about something like that. It's crazy. You're putting your whole lifeline on stuff like that. And then some people, that like you, it clicks like that, and then they go into this, launches them off into the outer space of just going and doing what you want to in business, and which is completely awesome, because it's being in business for a year and a half. It's not been easy. It's definitely not something where it comes lightly. You gotta work hard and grind it out, or you're gonna be sitting there in the dust.
I think most people, particularly people who don't own a business, don't really understand it's actually a lot, and I mean a lot, harder
hmm
to own a business than it is to have a job. And
Yeah,
and I
absolutely.
could get a job that was a lot easier than running my business that paid as much or more
Yep.
than I make, right? I'm
Yep.
a talented person. I could make a lot of money in a job.
hmm
And it's hard, very hard. And you give
Yep.
up a lot, including your sanity and your peace of mind, right?
Right.
But what you get is a freedom of your time, a freedom of your
hmm
choice, a freedom
hmm
to create in the way you want
hmm
to create, right? Like
hmm
there's a penalty, but there's a prize as well.
Absolutely, and that is like the biggest thing right there, is that prize. That's what we all hunt for. Well, I feel like it should be everybody's goal. Is that time and freedom should be something that everybody looks for. And they may not know that it's what they're missing, but I feel like that's what everybody's missing in this world.
I have a little piece I did on the five freedoms. So there's time, location, financial, freedom of creativity, and freedom of
Mm-hmm.
choice, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that our personalities are all made up by how we individually order those five freedoms. So, like for me, freedom of time and location are my absolute most important freedoms. I would give up financial freedom to have freedom of time and location.
So what you're saying is a calendar makes you used to probably make you just like hurt your chest looking at it.
No, I don't. What I mean by that is I want to be free to choose to spend my time the way I want to spend my time. I don't want to spend my time on someone else's schedule, right? I want to work the hours I want to work. I want to blend my life with my job,
Yep. Yep.
like.
I'm 100% in that same boat. That is me. You have to send me that because I really do want to look at that and read it a little bit.
I will. I'll make a little note here.
I would actually like to look at that because that's the type of stuff I've actually gotten into reading over the last like 8 months, and I never really read before. I was the ultimate jock. All I cared about was go and throw baseballs, come back home, probably go booze a little bit on the town, and then come back and do it again.
Right.
And then I started realizing I was like, man, I need to read. I just I've never done it. Just need to grow my brain, start doing it, and then I started reading. Read 2 business books back to back at the end of last year, and then I've read 7 Habits of Highly Effective People.
That's a hard to read book. It's a great book, but it's not easy to read.
No, and then I read the 12-Week Year, and then right now I'm on chapter 7 of the Scars and Stripes. It's a Tim Kennedy book.
Oh, I haven't read
But
that.
I recommend it. It's a read. It's a read for like it's essentially entrepreneurial book, but it's not in the same sense too, because he's just talking about his life experiences and saying, if I could do this, you can do it. I'm no different than you. I'm a regular person just like you. I don't want to get up in the morning. I want to hit snooze on my alarm clock, but this is what made me go. And he just kind of talks about what made him tick.
Nice.
Recommended read though.
I'll recommend a book for you that I think you'd like. It's good for anybody with a sales-based career. It's called
Yeah.
Influence: The Art of Persuasion,
Mm-hmm.
or The Science of Persuasion. It's by Robert Cialdini.
Mm-hmm.
So basically, they infiltrated years ago a whole bunch of the top sales organizations in the country and went through their training programs and
Mm-hmm.
learned about the 7. He's added a few, so it might be 8 now.
Mm-hmm.
Key principles of how you persuade people. It's the best. I call it the best non-sales book, the best non-sales sales book ever written.
Really?
Yes.
And it is the art of
Persuasion.
mm-hmm.
Influence: The Art of Persuasion.
Influence. The art of
Influence is the
persuasion.
word you need to remember. Influence.
Influence.
Yeah.
Yes. And if I forget about it, whenever I get done, I'll definitely shoot you a text or an email about it.
Yeah.
That's awesome. But no, Angie, I'm gonna let you leave the people with the last word today.
So my last word is this: don't let anybody ever tell you you can't become anything or anyone that you want to be, because your future is up to you, and you can choose whether to control it or to let the world control it for you.
Absolutely. Angie, thank you so much for joining us today, taking time out of your day to come and talk about your business and sit down with me. Once again, guys, burn the ship.